Hello and welcome to the Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter. Today we're going to be talking about some more political philosophy. And we're going to do that via this classic text right here. It's called the Communist Manifesto. You may know it well. It's by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. So socialism has there's been a new resurgence of that ideology. And a lot of socialism, the philosophy behind that, originates from the Communist Manifesto. Now, this is communism, socialism, two different things, but still, there's a lot of origin and beginning and foundational thought from the Communist Manifesto. So I think it's a timely work to discuss today. Now, what we want to focus on in this video, what I want to do is I don't want to focus so much on the conclusion that the Communist Manifesto brings to the table. And you may know it well, it's a hot topic. People debate it, particularly on the internet. This notion that capitalism will implode or explode, it's not sustainable, and it will lead to a revolution from the working class citizens or the wage laborers against the bourgeoisie or the capitalists, and this revolution will bring about a socialist utopia, right, which then will bring about communism. And there's a lot of people that say, oh, that's never going to happen. There's people that are going to say that's bound to happen. There's people like, well, why hasn't it happened yet? And it's back and forth all the time. But what we want to focus on here is the philosophy behind this book, this text. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is, what are the critiques of capitalism? And because however you feel about capitalism, whether you think it's a horrible system or you think it's God's gift to the world, right? Either way, capitalism is not perfect, far from it, right? There's a lot of critical analysis that we can give to capitalism, and the reason why the Communist Manifesto is so popular and so applicable to today, because that criticism is true. This isn't like some fantasy or some made up fairy tale that was devised by these two highly radical fantasy thinkers, right? This is the intellectuals really sitting down and thinking about the problems of capitalism, and it is still applicable today. And we see these problems that were discussed in the Communist Manifesto. We see them manifest today. And so, there's a lot of people they don't want to acknowledge the faults of capitalism, and there are many faults. And the Communist Manifesto definitely brings them out. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So it's more about the philosophy rather than the conclusion. Let's just focus on that first, because a lot of people don't really get to that part. They're just talking about the end result. But let's talk about the reasoning behind why Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels thought the way they did, because it's very sound and very truthful. So I will like to begin with the first quote that I picked here. Okay, so in case you are following along here, this is the Penguin Classics edition of the Communist Manifesto. Okay, this is page 222 at the bottom of the page. This is the second to last paragraph, and I begin at the last sentence of that paragraph. So, just in case you're following along. So I'm going to read this right here. It has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and Catholic cathedrals. What is it? The bourgeoisie class, capitalism or capitalists. They have accomplished all these wonders, right? So I'll continue. It has conducted expeditions that put in shade all former exoduses of nations and crusades. The bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production, and thereby the relations of production, and with them the whole relation of society. And I continue on the second sentence here on page 223. Constant revolutionizing of production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty and agitation distinguish the bourgeois. So listen to this. Now we're on the second paragraph of this page. The need of constant expanding market for its products chases the bourgeoisie over the whole surface of the globe and must nestle everywhere, settle everywhere, establish connections everywhere. Okay, let's stop here and discuss what's being said here. So we're talking about great accomplishments of humanity. Building the Egyptian pyramids, the Roman aqueducts, the Gothic cathedrals, on and on and on and on. You know, you look at the advancements of human technology. You know, you look today, the invention of electricity, and the electric grid, the highway system of America, the internet. You know, all these magnificent things that have been created. The issue is that it's never enough. Like, we always have to achieve more and more and more. And the question is why? The latest accomplishment dwarfs the previous one. And then we have the future accomplishment dwarfs the today's accomplishment. Why is it never enough? The argument is that we don't treat these accomplishments with the expectation of using them to advance humanity, or the meaning of what it means to be human. These accomplishments are treated, they're commodified, right? They're used by capitalists to just make money, make more and more money. And in that way, it's never enough. Instead of viewing these accomplishments or using these accomplishments for the advancement of human society, instead what we're doing is we're using these great accomplishments to just create more commodity, more money, more capital. And that's why these accomplishments lose their meaning, their true purpose, which should be to advance human culture and human society, but instead we're just using them to make more and more money. So it takes the meaning out of these very great accomplishments. This is a critique of capitalism. I'll continue, same page 223. This is the third paragraph at the start. The bourgeoisie has, through its exploitation of the world market, given up a cosmopolitan character to production and consumption in every country. And then I skip down to the third sentence here. All old established national industries have been destroyed or are daily being destroyed. They are dislodged by new industries whose introduction becomes a life and death question for all civilized nations. Then we go to the next sentence here. Skipping over. In place of the old wants, satisfied by the productions of the country, we find new wants, requiring for their satisfaction the products of distant lands and climes. So we have these wants, these goals that we're trying to achieve. Right. Let's take the internet, for example. A great accomplishment of humankind. And the internet, one of the purposes, the original want, was to make communication between human beings more easy, to communicate better. That was one of the major points of the internet. The ideals of it before, after it was this origin of this early networking system used by colleges and government agencies. When it was expanded, the point was to expand communication and share knowledge throughout people in the world. But what happened? We have that, right? But also the internet has been commodified, right? So then new wants came. Like, we can use the internet to make money. We could create commodities on the internet, like ad space, right? And then if we create ad space, then people can make money by creating products and then directly targeting those products to people that they want throughout the world. It'll be a lot more easier to do that. The market will expand. So the original want of, we just want to make information flow easier so that humankind can share knowledge faster and humanity can advance. That want was dwarfed by this new want of, this is now, it's easier to sell products on the internet because we get to increase our market, because now it's easier to target specific niches in various different countries throughout the world. And in this way, advancements, achievements, human developments, the meaning behind human advancements and achievements and developments, they become corrupted. And the argument is that this is what capitalism does. It's a sound argument, don't you think? I mean, we see this. Listen to this next quote I picked on page 228. And this is, I'm beginning on the third paragraph here. The lower strata of the middle class, all these sink gradually into the proletariat. Now, the proletariat is just another word that means working class, or the wage laborer. Partly because their diminutive capital does not suffice for the scale on which modern industry is carried on. Partly because their specialized skill is rendered worthless by new methods of production. And then I wrote some notes on my margin here. Let me share with you these notes. Individual truth becomes irrelevant in the midst of meaningless accomplishments of capitalism. So what happens is that individual truth, or the truth behind great accomplishments like the Egyptian pyramids or the Roman aqueducts or the internet, that original meaning, or that way of advancing human society in a good way, that meaning gets ejected out and a new meaning is put in. And that is the meaning of capitalism, which is just to make more and more money, more and more capital, more and more commodity. So then what does this mean? Well, let's continue. And what does this imply? We're talking about, human accomplishment becomes meaningless because it only serves to develop capital. But we're saying that this is meaningless. What makes this meaningless? How is it meaningless that we're making capital, or we're just focusing on the production of money and that kind of thing? Well, how is that meaningless? Right? That serves a purpose, right? Well, let's continue here on page 235. This is the next quote I picked. And here we start on the 5th paragraph. The theory of the communists may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. Hard-won, self-acquired, self-earned property. I skipped the paragraph here. Do you mean the property of the petty artisan and of the small peasant, a form of property that preceded the bourgeois form? He's asking hypothetically, like, is that what you're talking about? And then the authors, they answer, there's no need to abolish that. The development of industry has to a great extent already destroyed it and is still destroying it daily. So that's not what he's talking about. Karl Marx and Engels. They're not talking about the property of like artisans or like small, the lower or the lower middle class. But he's not talking about that. What they're talking about is this, and this is the last paragraph of this page. Does wage labor create any property for the laborer? Not a bit. It creates capital. Let me repeat that. Does wage labor create property for the laborer? Does that even happen? No, not a bit. It creates capital, i.e. that kind of property which exploits wage labor and which cannot increase except upon condition of begetting a new supply of wage labor for fresh exploitation. Property in its present form is based on the antagonism of capital and wage labor. Where are you getting at? What about when people buy a house or they buy a home, right? That's property. But, as we see, that doesn't work out as planned. And, think about it. Like when you buy a house, most people don't buy the home. They get caught up in debt, right? They buy a mortgage, and then as they pay their mortgage and they keep paying for their home, right? There's this talk of, this is an investment. This home is an investment. This property that I own is an investment. you have now commodified what you purchased. It has become capital. It is no longer really truly a home, is it? This is, again, originally this property was supposed to be a home, but now we're talking about, oh no, actually this is also an investment, right? And the property, the cost of the property, or what the property is worth, may go up, or it could go down. And so now the original meaning behind this accomplishment is taken away, and it was replaced by the objective of capitalism. And again, this is what Karl Marx and Engels are talking about. So I continue. This is page 236. This is the second paragraph, second sentence. Capital is a collective product, and only by the united action of many members, nay, in the last resort, only by the united action of all members of society can it be set in motion. Capital is, therefore, not a personal, it is a social power. When, therefore, capital is converted into common property, into the property of all members of society, personal property is not thereby transformed into social property. It is only the social character of the property that is changed. It loses its class character. So let me read you the notes that I wrote in my margins, in the margins of the book, trying to make sense of this. This is what I wrote. Capitalism becomes nihilistic, or nihilistic, however you want to pronounce that, because the pursuit of capital destroys the meaning of individual people. All right. So what we said, the pursuit of owning a home. It no longer is about, oh, I live in this house. I'm trying to build a home. I mean, it is about that originally, but then what happens is the whole, home as capital, home as commodity, the investment aspect of a home, that takes over, and it removes that original want of, I just want a home to live in. And in this way, we start seeing developments of homelessness, right? And things of that nature, because the meaning of buying a house is the offering a home to somebody, that is secondary to the capitalistic objective, which is investment, property as commodity. But what about trying to house people? Oh, that's secondary to what the house really is, which is a commodity. Again, I'll just keep repeating. What's happening in this capitalistic system, which is the critique, is that advancing human society, benefiting human beings to progress further, in their culture, that is pushed aside, and by this objective of commodification, which is ultimately meaningless. Now we move on to the fifth paragraph of page 236. The average price of wage labor is the minimum wage, i.e., the quantum of the means of subsistence which is absolutely requisite to keep the laborer in bare existence as a laborer. What, therefore, the wage laborer appropriates by means of his labor merely suffices to prolong and reproduce a bare existence. We by no means instead to abolish his personal appropriation of the products of labor, an appropriation that is made for the maintenance and reproduction of human life, and that leaves no surplus wherewith to command the labor of others. All that we want to do away with is the miserable character of this appropriation, under which the laborer lives merely to increase capital, and is allowed to live only insofar as the interests of the ruling class requires. So let's take that example of owning a home, right? Some people, the argument is, oh, you're just trying to not allow people to own houses. People, what's wrong with people owning property? And there's, the critique here, and this is very important to understand, what Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, their argument is, look, that's not our argument. Our argument is the purchasing of a home, and you're not really living in your home. You're just you're just serving the purpose of capital. You're just treating your home as a commodity, and you're working your ass off day in and day night, not really truly living. You're just, working 10, 12-hour days, 7 days a week to make the mortgage, right? And then all you're constantly thinking about is the home as investment. Oh, maybe the property will go up or it'll go down. I can sell it. Maybe I can rent this home to somebody else. In the meantime, there's like, many people out on the streets living homelessly. And it's like, well, we have all these homes. Why are there homeless people? And people are not even thinking about that, because all people are thinking about is the capitalistic goal, objective. The house is a commodity. And that's what their critique is. And overall, that's a critique for all accomplishments. When somebody achieves something, it becomes like this is no longer about helping the person. It's about, now you have this thing. It's gonna be a commodity, and all you're gonna use this thing for is the objective of increasing the capital of that commodity. That's all we're thinking about here. So it becomes nihilistic. The human meaning goes away. I continue on page 237, and this is the first paragraph, the last sentence here. In bourgeois society, capital is independent and has individuality, while the living person is dependent and has no individuality. That's exactly what we're talking about here. It's the capital that becomes independent, right? And it's the person that becomes dependent on the capital, where it should be the other way around, right? Right? The capital should be dependent on the person. The capital should serve the person, right? But instead, in a capitalistic society, the person serves the capital, right? The person is, all the effort the person is doing is increasing the capital of the commodity, which, how is that meaningful to the person, to the individual? There is no meaning. This is the critique, and this applies today, and this isn't like crazy or some sort of like radical communistic fantasy or delusional thought process. This is actually happening, and it's a truthful critique. I skip over to the fifth paragraph now. You are horrified at our intending to do away with private property. That's what they're saying. Like, people who are like, oh, no socialism, we can't have that. And they're responding. It's like, you are horrified at our intending to do away with private property. But in your existing society, private property is already done away with for 9/10 of the population. Its existence for the few is solely due to its non-existence in the hands of those 9/10. And that's what Marx and Engels is talking about. It's not about doing away with private property. It's doing away with this reality that most people do not have private property, even though and then the people that do have private property, they're not using it for their own purposes. Right? That's the critique. And we skip to the sixth paragraph here. In one word, you reproach us with intending to do away with your property. And they're talking about the upper class, right? The people that actually, the 1% of the world that actually uses their property as a home. And their response, Marx and Engels, is like, precisely so. That is just what we intend, to get away with your private property, the capitalistic private property as commodity. Yeah, we are trying to do away with that. And I read you my note. The effort in owning property, i.e. a mortgage, for example, eliminates true meaningful effort of human existence. I'm just trying to reiterate what I'm thinking, which is what we talked about. So let me read you this other quote that I picked on page 242. This is the fourth paragraph here. There are, besides eternal truths, such as freedom, justice, etc., that are common to all states of society. But communism abolishes eternal truths. It abolishes all religion and all morality, instead of constituting them on a new basis. It therefore acts in contradiction to all past historic experience. What does this accusation reduce itself to? The history of all past society has consisted in the development of class antagonisms that assume different forms at different epochs. But whatever form they may have taken, one fact is common to all past ages, vis-a-vis the exploitation of one part of society by the other. So Marx and Engels, their argument is it's a class issue, and it's always been a class issue. That's where human society has suffered. That's the basis of human suffering, right? Or the societal hardship is classism. Classism is the common denominator of all societal breakdowns. This is their argument, which is why they're so focused on this communist idea. No wonder then that the social consciousness of past ages, despite all the multiplicity and variety it displays, moves within certain common forms or general ideas, which cannot completely vanish except with the total disappearance of class antagonisms. And I write in my notes here, classism is the common thread corrupting all human ideology throughout history. And this is Engels and Marx's argument that, at the end of the day, when you look at the problems of society, what happens is there was an original intent to create something good, but then that creation became a commodity under this capitalistic framework. The meaning behind the original creation and development of the thing, of the societal object, it was repurposed to either sell a product, increase somebody's capital, or become a commodity to sell. And so the original meaning goes straight out the window. I actually oftentimes get comments that talk about communism or socialism as, this is a very nihilistic, or a philosophy where it assumes life is inherently meaningless or something like that. I get those comments often, and that's actually not the case at all. Right? What Marx is saying, what Engels is saying, is they're for meaning. They're the opposite of nihilism. They believe life does have meaning and there is a purpose in life, but their argument is that capitalism takes away that purpose. Capitalism creates nihilism, and it creates nihilism as a dominant way of living, and that's the problem. And that's the opposite of what we think of today. Right? We think capitalism is, this way that serves a meaning, a purpose. Like, by creating more and more things and making more and more money, this is how we find meaning in life. Meaning is from the tools that we sell, from the businesses that we create, and the money we make. More money, more money, more money, right? But Engels and Marx are saying no. Actually, there's no meaning in that. And it's just an endless chasing, like an endless cycle of just making more and more money, to the point where it becomes unsustainable. And your original intent, or what you could be doing with this accomplishment, instead of just being obsessed about making more commodity, is actually advancing human culture, human society. And you see this all the time. You take music for instance, pop culture. You talk about how a lot of music is commodified, right? And you have like very bad music that you just hear on the radio, and it only serves the purpose of making money. That whole argument, you see that in pop culture. The bad television that's just like, oh, we're just gonna throw this on here and we know people are gonna watch it, we're gonna make money. And so the original, like, okay, what about the artistic value of it? That's put in second place. This is what I'm talking about. And this is the argument of Marx and Engels. So what I want to showcase here is, don't completely dismiss the Communist Manifesto as like, oh, this is just radicalism, nonsense. This is just crazy people talking, crazy commies, weird socialists, far left thinkers that don't really have no touch with reality, or how things actually work in the real world, right? No, actually, this is some very accurate and truthful and meaningful criticism that applies today, which is why this book is so popular and it resonates a lot even today. And I encourage you to read it. You don't have to agree with all of it, just like I think all philosophy texts, right? You don't agree with, there's things that you've encountered that you probably are not going to agree with. but and I'm talking about the great philosophy texts. But then the great philosophy texts have very important things that are like, oh, this is definitely true, and this applies. So read it seriously, and you don't have to agree with everything, and the whole eventually capitalism will result in some revolution that will lead to a socialist utopia. I mean, that's just something that you may or might not jive with, but the critique of capitalism is very strong here, and it's definitely applicable, and it's true. And they do have some good points. Well, you have been watching the Black Ponder. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.